Hello and welcome to the Functionally Enlightened podcast with Dr. Sharon Sarita. We interview well-respected medical and functional practitioners, as well as patients who have overcome disabling chronic conditions, such as dysautonomia, and reclaimed their health. These enlightened guests provide helpful tips on managing chronic pain and illnesses, using a combination of traditional and whole-body healing modalities. If you're interested in natural healing and quality of life improvement, you're in the right place. Thank you for listening to today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Functionally Enlightened podcast. Today, we're thrilled to welcome two incredible guests whose combined expertise really bridges the gap between science and the soul of nutrition. Dr. John, MD, is a physician, a researcher, and author dedicated to transforming the way we understand type 2 diabetes and obesity. His decades of research and all of his experience in the past, they've really challenged conventional thinking around insulin management. And they encourage a return to that mindful, need-based eating as the foundation to metabolic health. Dr. Poothullil's mission is a simple yet profound one, and really to empower individuals to reclaim their health, one that's informed and one where they can feel like they again return to advocacy in their own climates and can also be an influence for the people around them. You can find his educational resources at drjohnonhealth.com. Joining him is Chef Colleen, who is an award-winning natural foods chef. She's a tonic Jing master and co-author of the Diabetes-Free Cookbook and Exercise Guide with Dr. John. And she has a background in Chinese medicine, shiatsu, and raw culinary arts. Colleen has spent nearly 3 decades helping people heal through food. Her recipes can translate complex dietary needs into nourishing restaurant-quality meals designed to balance the body, calm cravings, and support long-term wellness, which is something we all need, especially my audience here in the chronic illness community. We all have had a difficult time with reintroductions of foods following these very, very restrictive diets. So together, we're all going to explore the intersection of mindful eating, metabolic healing, and the energetics of food. Thank you so much, Dr. John and Chef Colleen, for joining me today on the Functionally Enlightened.
Thank you for having us.
Of course.
We're happy to be here.
Thank you. For both of you, your journeys into nutrition and metabolic health began from personal experiences. How did those experiences really shape the way you're working with clients today?
Colin, you want to go first?
Okay. Sure. I started off very early. I learned shiatsu, and I started learning about energy and how the meridians in the body connect to the organs, and how imbalances in our body translate into different cravings, different symptoms in the body of imbalance. And it was like a revelation to me to see how everything actually is connected. There's not just random things that happen to us. They happen as a result of the choices we make, a lot of the lifestyle choices. And that's what type 2 diabetes is very much impacted by, is our lifestyle choices. So when I started to see the connection between all the things, I just had this desire to learn as much as I could learn. And I was taking classes and traveling around the country, learning from different teachers and chefs and how to address this in people, because I really wanted to help people understand that everything really is connected and you have choices and you can improve your life. So that started a long journey for me, which led me into nutrition, into cooking, into healing, into all kinds of things.
I was always fascinated by the workings of the human body during my high school years. During my medical training, it became more personal because I watched one of my relatives enduring years of complications from type 2 diabetes. And finally, she lost one of her legs that had to be amputated. So I thought, well, the doctor will change the medication. But the doctor continued with insulin management. By the way, her husband was a medical school professor. So he was very diligent in keeping her blood sugar under control with insulin. But a year and a half later, she had to have the other leg amputated. Can you imagine a husband who is ready to retire having to take care of his wife for physical needs, emotional needs, intellectual needs, companionship, everything? And so I wanted to know why. So I learned more about type 2 diabetes and started with the food intake regulatory mechanism. Just to give you an example, nobody can predict when you are going to feel hungry next. How does the brain know when to create the sensation of hunger? And what happens to the food we eat? And when I went along with that, I started questioning the management of type 2 diabetes. For example, if you are resistant to insulin, why are you asked to take insulin to control the resistance? So this is what led me to the inquiry into diabetes. And there is something wrong, I thought, with the current management of type 2 diabetes. And it all starts with food. And that is why I was fortunate to come up and team with Colleen to get something that people can actually put their fingers on and then start controlling their own food intake and control the blood sugar.
And I love the partnership that you guys have with providing the science and the research and the technology with practical tips that everyone can implement in their lives. So I did take a look at that book, and I'm going to make sure to include where people can find that in our resources. But let's go into, you mentioned, the insulin resistance piece, and we use those terms quite often. And there's many people that have been receiving diagnoses of type 2. There's even several that I'm working with that have received a type 1 diagnosis. So that's kind of a different animal, but it can still be managed similarly. So can we kind of branch into a little bit more? What is insulin resistance, and how do you guys work to help people learn proper ways to manage that is sustainable?
Colleen, you
Dr.
want
Sharon?
to?
No, you go ahead.
Okay. Originally, type 1 diabetes was diagnosed because let me back up a little bit. If somebody comes to your house to visit you, how do you know there is somebody outside? Either that person knocks on the door or rings the doorbell. Now, every cell in the body can use glucose to produce energy. But when the glucose is outside, it has no way of letting the cell know it is outside. There is no doorbell glucose can ring. That is the job of insulin. So even when there is glucose outside, if insulin is not there to ring the doorbell, the cell inside starves. There is plenty of energy staying outside. And these children used to die by age 10 before insulin was discovered. Almost 100 years ago, two researchers in Canada injected insulin to a 10-year-old boy who was almost on his deathbed, and he survived. Dr. Elliot Jocelyn in Boston treated the maximum number of type 1 diabetics. That means the type 1 means their pancreas does not produce insulin. And when Dr. Elliot Jocelyn gave insulin, these children survived. They lived a normal life. He trained nurses to go into the community and give insulin to anybody, whether child or adult, who have high blood sugar, give them insulin, and their blood sugar went down. What he did not know was, at that time, adults, when they become diabetic, they have normal insulin level. So when that became available, the endocrinologist had a problem. Type 1 is there is no insulin production or not adequate insulin. Type 2, there is insulin, but still high blood sugar. So they should have known at that time this is a different disease, as you mentioned. But then they cannot get the connection as an as a hormonal disease or endocrine disease. So they teamed up and coined the term insulin resistant. The insulin is there, but the cell is not responding to insulin. The problem is there is no test. And they have to select. If whole body is resistant, then it is like type 1. But this is not type 1 because insulin is there. So they selected 3 cells out of 200, the liver, the fat, and muscle cells as resistant, based on no direct evidence. There is no test to measure the degree of resistance to any one of these sites. But that has been, promoted over and over. And of course, the pharmaceutical companies and the glucose monitoring device manufacturers, they promoted the whole idea. So that idea has stuck. They put it in the medical textbooks everywhere in the world. I learned the same thing in medical school. But when I saw exactly what happened to my relative, that is when I started to question. So type 1, in summary, means there is not enough insulin production in the body. Type 2 means there is insulin, but the blood sugar is still going up.
So Chef Colleen, how do you help people once they've already received a diagnosis, or even if there's that pre-diabetic disclaimer that's kind of hovering, but not given an official diagnosis? How do you help people learn to either reverse the condition or manage so that they're not feeling the effects of these metabolic shifts?
Yes, well, when you do your fasting blood sugar and it's over 100, as you know, the people will say you're either pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic. And basically, along with Dr. John's work, he has said that the grains are one of the big culprits, which are a lot of the, wheat, flour, corn, rice, things like that. Carbohydrates, more the simple carbohydrates are the ones that really spike the blood sugar. So what I do to address it is I help people learn recipes that are delicious, because one of the big things that people really need is they need to feel satisfied. They need to feel pleasure from food. So a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to have to be deprived. I have to give up the things that I like. And so I create recipes that are actually the opposite of that. They're so delicious that you want to keep eating them, but they don't contain any grains. They don't contain any processed sugar, and they don't contain corn or rice or things like that. So I use substitutes, and that's my specialty, is helping people with special diets substitute things that still feel satisfying, that still taste delicious, and they're still very nutritious, but without those offending ingredients.
So we're going to go into some of those ingredients a little more in detail, because I think this is very conflicting data that's out there, especially around the sweeteners that are available for use and what is supposed to be considered low glycemic. But before we go, that I do want to share, I do use a CGM, like Dr. John mentioned. I use a CGM for myself when I'm including like new ingredients within my diet. And as I shift out of a therapeutic ketogenic diet, I noticed specifically that I still have issues with all grains, including oats, which I have never seen my glucose spike above 200. And when I try to reintroduce it, that's the first time I've seen that number show. Generally, I'm between 80 and 110, pretty stable throughout the day when I'm eating through the ketogenic diet. So now we come into neurologic conditions that's really, really good for that type of diet. But there's other scenarios where having such a restricted diet is not the most instrumental thing to healing. So how would you go about helping a person adjust from that strict of a diet to be able to include more of those whole food products that are a little bit higher in carbs?
Okay, well, there are recipes in the book that do include sweeteners such as dates. I use typically whole food ingredients as sweeteners, because dates, while they do have sugar, they also have fiber and minerals. And when you metabolize the date, it slows down how fast that sugar hits your bloodstream, so you don't get the quick spike of sugar like you get in a candy bar. And the foods that I make, like the cookies and the bars and things like that, or having little treats in the fridge that if you start to feel a craving, you can grab one of those and you'll be satisfied with just 1 or 2 pieces, but it's a healthy sweetener. It's not a high sugar spiking sweetener. So also including foods with protein, healthy fats, and fiber is the main strategy.
Very good. And what types of fiber are most recommended?
I typically like as much vegetables as possible. So I have kind of a small to moderate size of protein portion and a large portion of vegetables. And once you start to detox your body and clean out some of those offending things like the grains, your body will start to naturally want those healthier foods. In the beginning, you have to just really make them delicious so that you want them, and then you'll be surprised, and your taste palette actually changes because people are so used to eating fried foods and sugary foods and foods with lots of oils and salt that their palate is off. And once you start to detox that, you actually clean your palate, you start to actually taste the flavors of food. And most vegetables are really delicious. And I use a lot of spices also because spices are therapeutic and they give a lot of flavor. And so you're not missing flavor. And when you eat the food, it's delicious, you feel satisfied, but you're substituting spices and real food, and your body will adjust to that.
In a few minutes, we're going to touch on the macronutrient piece, but I want to turn back to Dr. John. If you can add on the conversation as well as, tell us a little bit more about the testing and symptoms that you see people exhibiting as they're coming into this stage in their lives.
An interesting and very important question. Let me take it up in 3 different parts as just to continue what Colleen has said. One, she said the sugar, natural sugar, from fruits, because that is sucrose, contains 2 molecules, glucose and fructose. When they are digested, they are absorbed. The glucose part is absorbed faster than the fructose part. What that means is there are 2 things about glucose, that is the glycemic index and the glycemic load. Glycemic index is the one that affected the blood sugar goes up very fast because the sugar is easily absorbed as in glucose. Glycemic load is the total amount of glucose that will be coming from that particular food when it is fully digested. So most people may not be aware of that. It may spike up slow, but if it lasts longer, that can be equally damaging. The second thing colleague said was about vegetable fiber and getting most of the nutrients from vegetable or sugar from vegetables, because the importance of that is the fiber provides nutrients for our good, healthy gut bacteria, which is critical for our overall health. So that fiber feeds the bacteria. If you don't have good bacteria, you are going to be in big trouble, as you know, as you have been telling your audience. So that is one thing that the fiber will give us. So overall, the food that we eat should be what the body needs. And Colleen then mentioned the use of spices. Most people may not understand this. The spices that we use gives us enjoyment. Why do we enjoy the spice? Because there is some micronutrient that the body needs. If you don't need it, you cannot enjoy it. You won't enjoy it. So that is the key. Though these spices have been in development, or people have used it for thousands of years, because the body finds some value in them, and that value primarily comes from micronutrients. So I fully support what Colleen is trying to do to make the meal more palatable and enjoyable. When you sit down to eat, that first bite, you take it so enjoyable if you're hungry, but after a few minutes, the intensity of enjoyment goes down. Why? The brain says the nutrients we need from that food, you already gotten it, now you can stop. This is what toddlers use. If you look at them, you will observe 3 things. They will eat only when they are hungry. They will pick and choose, regardless of how many things grandma made. And when they are done, they could care less how much is left on the plate. They would rather go out and... So if they can do that, why can't adults do? So Colleen is trying to help us to go back to the way we used to eat, enjoy the meal. And when the intensity of enjoyment goes down, you just stop.
And the fasting insulin was brought up. We were talking about how other people can at least monitor where they're heading and make sure that they're taking in the proper nutrients, despite not having that satiety that should be there from the toddler years. So I do love that you honed in on that, like eating on a needs basis versus eating to get full and become lethargic afterwards. So I love that aspect. And then just again, looking at how people can address this and manage to shift their diet and lifestyle. I know that there's also talk around what you said, the microbiome, and how there are certain bacterial species that will cause the craving for carbohydrates. And so we feed like an addiction. We keep feeding carbohydrates to the body and allowing these bacterial colonists to become opportunistic and overgrown, causing so many other symptoms. So we want to kind of wrap it all around, like how can a person identify this as a problem from the inception?
I would like to address that because I have a lot of experience working with cravings and things like that. So definitely it's a huge issue. And a lot of people think, oh, I don't have the willpower to eat healthy. I don't have the willpower to make the recipes and things. It's not so much about willpower, it's about your gut. And if you have that craving and you think it's you think you're the one who's craving sugar. You're not the one who's craving sugar. It's your gut, the bacteria in your gut. We're actually an ecosystem, and 90% of the cells are bacteria. They're not even you. So what you think is you is actually a community of consciousness that is asking for that food. And if you feed the unhealthy bacteria in your gut, you help them grow. So you just have to recognize that if I allow this choice, that the bad bacteria are going to continue to get stronger and stronger. And really, what you want to do is get your gut back in balance and feed the good bacteria. So in the beginning, it's a little challenging when you have a craving. What I recommend is people either eat some protein or eat something fermented, because those things are a healthy fat. Like you could have half an avocado with a scoop of sauerkraut, raw sauerkraut on it, and that will stop the craving. I also have some sweet options. Sometimes I'll take one date, take the pit out, fill it with almond butter, and just one date with some almond butter in it will stop your sugar craving. As a nut, like it feeds what you need, and it gives you healthy fat, healthy protein, and fiber and minerals. So you have to start recognizing that when you have that craving, it's not you that's having the craving, it's your bad bacteria, and you don't want to feed that. You want to strengthen the good bacteria in your gut.
Dr. John, do you have something to add on that?
This is when you add probiotics like fermented food or yogurt, simple yogurt, that is, you are directly feeding the bacteria, a good bacteria. On the other hand, if you eat food that requires very little digestion, more of the complex carbohydrate will reach the lower gut and promote the growth of unhealthy bacteria. So your food has a lot to do with not only feeding yourself, but you need your healthy bacteria to be alive and well. Otherwise, they will demand and direct the brain, because the signaling molecules that nerve cells use, their production starts in the gut. And these molecules are used by the brain. So there is a big and strong connection between the intestinal bacteria and your brain function. If you don't have healthy gut, you don't have healthy brain. So you need to protect your gut first through the probiotics and for the right food, and that protects your overall body and overall health.
As functional diagnostic nutrition practitioners, we rely on really functional labs like the GI map stool analysis, a mucosal barrier assessment, to see the state of the gut, like the lamina propria and the digestive enzymes, the diamine oxidase that's produced versus histamine. And we always work to balance that. So some of the ingredients that you just listed, beautiful ingredients to feed the gut, but there are some people that are very histamine sensitive in the beginning, and so they need to work on healing the gut. What are some methods that people can use to gradually be able to increase their tolerance of the best supported foods for the gut health?
I think you have to start slow. I always recommend for people to only maybe change one thing at a time and really just be gentle with yourself. If you try to do a quick change or an overnight cold turkey, throw everything out and start new, it usually is not sustainable. So it's about crowding out the bad things over time. And maybe you just add in one healthy thing a week to start. Maybe try one recipe from the book or one meal where you exclude some of those grains or things that you're normally used to that aren't going to help you.
I
And then
divide the food
over
into
time, just it
the
becomes
first
bigger, it
is
snowballs.
food you know that will give you trouble.
Mhm.
Okay?
So yeah, I would start slow, adding in, and then gradually things fall away, or you can take them out, and you start to increase the frequency of doing that. So it becomes a gradual process that's sustainable.
I Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. I would divide the whole food you eat into three groups. One group, these are foods that you cannot tolerate. The second group contains food you know that you have no problems with. The third group contains food that when you already have a problem with one food, then the lining of the intestine has been damaged, the lining that produces digestive enzymes. So until they come back, the third group of foods you cannot tolerate. So you need to slow them down or don't take them during the time when you're having problems. And then, as Colleen said, gradually reintroduce them back and then build them up. So once you are aware of these three groups of foods, then you are fine because you don't know what you will get when you are outside eating, when you're invited to somebody's house. They may have cooked, they have used the same utensils to cook something, and then you get into trouble. Then immediately you fall back on your safe foods and then get the gut back to normal.
Absolutely. So, Chef Colleen, I know you've studied the organ-food relationship in Chinese medicine. And so, again, going back to where our audience is coming from, the implant illness community, either themselves or family members, which foods have you seen or which foods have you seen that are more supportive, that could be calming to the gut and nourishing to the immune system? Which foods would you say should be highlighted?
Well, I think typically a lot of people who have the food issues typically have an imbalance in the sweet flavor. And a lot of people try to avoid bitterness, but bitter is actually a medicinal flavor that we need to include more of. So it could be as simple as just including more fresh herbs. For example, if you, one of the recipes in the book is Dijon salmon with capers, and one of the ingredients is parsley, fresh parsley. So a lot of people leave the parsley on their plate. They don't eat the parsley, but the parsley is medicine. If you eat the parsley, it helps your body. It helps your digestion. And a lot of people who have digestive issues actually need a lot of bitter flavor. So either you could take bitters as an extract that you can just put in water before your meal, or you just include more fresh herbs or bitter flavors in the recipe. And so the recipes in the book I tried to flavor balance. And I also talk about this in the book, how to do that. There's 5 flavors. There's sweet, salty, bitter, sour, and pungent or spicy. And every recipe that you make ideally would have some representation of all of those flavors, but in different proportions. So you wouldn't necessarily detect bitter in some of the foods, but if you add a little bit of parsley or a little bit of some fresh herb or vegetable or spice, something like that that's bitter, you include it, and everyone has a unique balance in their body. You can't predict what somebody necessarily needs. But when you include all 5 flavors in your food, everyone who eats that food is fed because their imbalance is addressed by the flavor. So I try to include all of those flavors in the recipes. And when you're making food at home, tasting the food, you say, which flavor am I missing here? What can I add to make it more well-rounded? And then everyone will be satisfied by it.
Chef Colleen, I appreciate you bringing that out to the limelight too, because I know even personally when I'm making a dish, I focus on just one flavor, like what is the purpose of this? And sometimes we do segregate those different things because we think that it doesn't belong. So it's really going to be helpful to look at the recipes you guys put together and then look at how those flavor profiles are working, like you said, medicinally to help restore the body's function.
And also people recognize that they don't actually consciously know why, but everyone's like, wow, that's so good. And it's so good because it has so many layers and it has like the background. It has the first flavor, but then it has all the background supporting flavors and things that maybe other versions of it don't have all of those layers. And that's why people like the recipes.
Let me jump in add one thing. Human body needs over 100 different nutrients for healthy functioning. When you sit down to eat, you have no clue what nutrients the body is looking for. But the body directs you to eat the food that contains the nutrients that you need once you sample it. If the nutrient is needed, it will create the enjoyment. And that is what Colin is talking about. When you have different nutrients, if there is something that the body needs, you will immediately feel, oh, this is what I need. I enjoy, this is good. So indirectly, even though we don't know the science, this is how our body has been programmed to respond to something that we need, we put in your mouth.
We had a little bit of connection issues there, but I think we got that. All right. Dr. John, in your research in diabetes, you've emphasized the importance of restoring the metabolic health. And we want to know, how does metabolic balance influence immune resilience in people facing chronic inflammatory burden, especially from implants?
As I mentioned, we need over 100 different nutrients, and we don't know which ones the body is looking for at any given time. So in general, I ask people to concentrate on eating on a daily basis at least 3 different vegetables, 3 different fruits, 3 different nuts, along with different spices that you can use to prepare your meal. Concentrate on the enjoyment of food. Eat only when you are hungry. And just to give you an example, when I was counseling a group of adults, 10 of them, I asked them to write down for 3 days the exact time they felt hungry and the exact time they ate. 4 out of 10 never felt hungry for 3 days. But that did not stop them from eating. So I asked them why. The simple answer was because it was time to eat. So we get conditioned, not only the time of food, but the type of food and the quantity of food. Once you get older, once you feel hungry, you will put on the plate the same volume of food. And once you put it on the plate, you're going to finish it. So you get conditioned. That is the conditioning that we have to work against when you have chronic illnesses or health conditions. You have to eat what we need and how much we need when we need. So it's a retraining process.
I know we work with metabolic typing a lot in my realm. So I want to see from both of you, Dr. John and Chef Colleen, what are your thoughts on metabolic typing? And do you think that there is, or do you believe that there is a preferred macronutrient ratio for each individual?
I feel like it can be a guideline, but I'm not too strictly adherent to any particular philosophy, and I think everyone is individual. We have different genetics and different environments, different experiences, different conditioning, and I think each person has to experiment through trial and error to see really what works for them and what doesn't. I don't think you can say there's one diet fits all or one way of eating fits all. I think it's really very individual.
The averages by virtue of a large population study is a very good tool for research. But when you apply that at individual level, that will not be scientific. Even the body mass index. In 2023, the American Medical Association took the position that the body mass index cannot be applied at the individual level because our genotype and our phenotype are different, each individual. So having a number for you need so much of this, so much of that, that will not be practical for individual. As a general guideline, as Colleen said, yes, they are all well and fine. But you have to rely on your own body, what the feedback you get, and that is what you have to go by. But so try everything, see what the body says, then you react to that.
Absolutely. I agree 100% that even when people have this data, whether it be genetic or the metabolic typing diet, there always needs to be adjustments made. And we see this across the board, not just, all of your meals should be based on this ratio, but we see also that there's different needs for the body, energy, resilience, and management throughout different times of the day. So one other question for you guys in terms of these kind of fad diets or medicinal diets, there is a lot of talk around intermittent fasting mimicking diet. I'm sorry. What are your thoughts around that when trying to control blood sugar swings?
I think for people who have diabetes, it's a little more challenging to do the fasting diets. I'm a big supporter of fasting. I think it's a great thing for the body to reset. But people who have blood sugar issues have more challenge doing that. So I think it's something you have to, again, take on an individual level and try to manage. Some tricks you can use, for example, if you're trying to do intermittent fasting or fasting for some period, instead of only having water or something, trying some bone broth. If you're not vegetarian, that will help the body feel, get some nutrients and feel a little satiated. So there's tricks you can use to kind of be able to do it if it's challenging for you. I think it's a great tool, but again, you have to manage it according to the individual.
My position is every day you are fasting in between meals. You're fasting all night long. So if you want to fast a little longer, it makes no difference. It is not how often you eat, it is how much you eat. If you are hungry, one day you eat 10 times a day. The next day, if you don't feel hungry, you eat 3 times a day or twice a day. What difference does it make? It is similar to, does it matter when you put the gasoline in your car? It is how long you go, how far you go. That makes a difference at how much gasoline you need or when you put it in. So if you can function with two meals a day or 3 meals a day or 10 meals a day, to me, it makes no difference. Your body will adjust because we are all adjusting from the moment we are born. Every few hours, 4-hour feeding. Then you go to school. Then you have to readjust. You cannot eat every 4 hours. Then you go to work. Some days you may not be able to eat all day long. So each individual is different. If we can accommodate it, that's fine. And even in each individual, each day can be different. So I have no particular comment about fasting or not fasting. If you can do it, you can get the result you want, that is fine.
And as you said, that hunger can cause like a hormesis, like that stress that is actually beneficial to the body from time to time, but monitoring how you're feeling afterwards. Of course, we never want to prolong something that will be a detriment to a person's functioning. So here is another question that I'm going to direct to both of you. What is one powerful but often overlooked food or behavioral shift that could dramatically improve health outcomes for someone, again, navigating through any type of chronic illness?
I would like to say that my number one food is water. So getting good quality water, and that means not purified filtered water. It means as much as possible close to spring water that comes straight out of the earth. And a lot of places there, you can go and find a spring and collect water that comes straight from the earth. It has all of those properties of the earth and energy of the earth, and you can preserve it in glass bottles. So I think drinking water out of plastic's not a great idea, but I also think drinking water from the tap and filtering it is not a great idea. So the number one biggest thing to me that people can do is drink healthy water, and you can often have water delivered to you that's spring water that's delivered in glass or in BPA-free plastic. But the people, I think, overall are dehydrated, and we need to have that water that can cleanse the cells and help the cells release the toxins so that they can have the environment they need to be healthy. So when you give your cells the right environment, your body wants to heal. It's constantly trying to heal, but you need to give it the environment to heal. And I think water is one of those foundations because our bodies are about 70% water. So when you take in good water and water with the good intentions that you put into the water, it's like medicine and everything that your body needs. So for example, if you're 70% water, food is so much less than that. Water is so much more important even than food. So that's my number one.
I would suggest that when you are hungry, your body releases adrenaline. When you are stressed, your body releases adrenaline. And if you're hungry and your adrenaline is released, when you eat, the adrenaline level goes down, you calm down. Imagine if you get stressed while you are hungry. The adrenaline shoots up and you are just eating without any knowledge of how much you are eating. So the stress-induced hunger is the number one problem because people use food as to calm down, as a compensating mechanism or a calming mechanism without even knowing. So if at all possible, try not to get angry with anybody while you are hungry. Do something to take care of your hunger first and then deal with the anger aspect of it or stress reliever. So that is, I believe it's easily, that can be trained and can be accomplished without much problem.
And when you have that well managed, that hangry sensation is not really a concern. I know that that's something people bring up quite often. Like they either have dizziness, lightheadedness, or irritability when they're hungry or if they skip meals. So that's something that is also in the like the metabolic assessment that we often use. With that, I know that both of you have offered a lot of information here, and this show is not going to be able to do it justice. So I would love for our audience to be able to either reach out to either one of you or find more resources and definitely have access to your book. So can you share how our audience can get some more information?
Oh, the book is available on Amazon. It's called the Diabetes-Free Cookbook and Exercise Guide. And people can reach me through email. My email is chefcolleenhello@gmail.com. Dr. John?
Yeah, my information is available on Dr. John on health.com, and it has got animation video on type 2 diabetes. For example, there are so many questions about the physical fitness, the area of the physiology or physical nature. For example, 85% of diabetics in the United States are obese or overweight. But 60% of the adults in the developing countries like China and India, they are considered not obese. So why do a non-obese person get diabetes? So all this information people need to know. No, you don't have a type 2 diabetic gene. You don't inherit a type 2 diabetic gene. Otherwise, you should be diabetic from childhood. But it develops later. Why? So it is the diet or the food that you put in your mouth. If the food that you put in is not digested and absorbed as glucose, your blood sugar cannot go up. So you have the control. The treatment of diabetes starts in the kitchen. And if you don't put it in your mouth, the food that is absorbed as glucose, your blood sugar cannot go up. So you have to be in charge. You take charge of your body, what you put in your mouth, and you can control most of these lifestyle-induced conditions such as obesity, type 2 diabetes.
And along with that, all of the research now going into brain cognition and decline, so known as type 3 diabetes, but all can be controlled or managed with dietary and lifestyle adjustments, including the physical piece. So I appreciate you opening that topic up, and we'd love to discuss that maybe on a future show with both of you, like how this expands beyond blood sugar management and how it really impacts our systemic organs, like all of our entire functioning, the ability from just major, we'll say, the ability to not have symptoms from chronic illness and be able to return to a normal functioning life without the fear of triggering episodes. I appreciate both you, Dr. John and Chef Colleen, for sharing your guidance. We'll make sure to include those links and how to contact you, especially the link to the book, so that people can have access to this in their own hands. So thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Sharon. We appreciate it.
And thank you
Sharon?
to all. Thank you to all of our audience. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.